Joining me now is the former Victorian Liberal Party President, Michael Kroger, and former Labor Minister, Stephen Conroy. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Michael, first to you, the debate around superannuation and the federal focus on that, does it have any spillover into something like a very local by-election like Aston, or is it all about local issues there?
No, KG, it will spill over. It takes a while to seep through, several weeks, but of course we've got a month until the by-election, and it seeps through because bit by bit you learn a bit more. Robert Gottliebson wrote this afternoon that this new tax will tax unrealised capital gains but not give you a refund for capital losses if you've paid tax on the gains that were unrealised. So the more and more that comes out, the more people get concerned and scared that this thing was put together in a great hurry without proper consideration. So the answer is yes, it does have an effect.
Stephen Conroy, what's been your view of the way that all of that was managed? The kite was flown and it landed pretty quickly. Was it all rushed?
Well, I think it's been an untidy few days for Labor, no question about that. I think the by-election context meant that it had to be, get a landing pretty quickly. So I think the chances of Labor in the by-election have always been less than 50%. The Libs, for all their pretence, are always favourites. There's no government's won a by-election in another party seat since Federation, I think was the figure that someone quoted. So I think they wanted to put it to bed. Yes, there's going to be ongoing scare campaigns and sort of nitpicking like Michael's just described, but I think this will evolve round to the bigger issues at play, and that is cost of living, that is the local infrastructure. I think they'll begin to be the issues over the next 4 weeks. I know the Libs will want to keep trying to beat it up, but the Liberal Party picked a strong candidate, and Labor's got a candidate almost out of nowhere, a great campaign that almost stole the seat. So there's two good candidates out there. There'll be a lot of local infrastructure discussions and cost of living. The Reserve Bank Governor, again, proved to be a clown with his pronunciation of 3 or 4 more interest rate rises to come. The economy's gone flat, inflation's coming off. He's pushed too hard. He's got the fundamentals that are underpinning the inflation wrong. And those are all going to be much more lively debates, I suspect, over the next 4 weeks than a superannuation issue around whether or not untaxed capital gains are realised or not.
The Treasurer didn't rule out immediately this week when he was asked by David Koch on Channel 7 whether he could rule out any change on the capital gains tax exemption on the family home. A few hours later, he did at a news conference when I put the comments made by the Prime Minister to him that same morning where he said, "We're not doing it, ! Not happening." Anthony Albanese's instincts immediately were right. The Treasurer, he corrected them a few hours later, Stephen, but not a great day for him.
Look, when you get into these situations where, unfortunately, Treasury had produced a document, which they're required to produce, which outlines a whole list of tax concessions. As soon as you start saying yes to one or no to one, you're going to get the list of the next 20. So I think Jim was doing his best to try and not get drawn into that particular game. Albo made it clear. But just to give you the exact same example on the Liberal side, I think Peter Stefanovic hammered Angus Taylor for 5 minutes about whether or not they would agree to repeal this measure after they won government. And Angus ducked and weaved and wouldn't give the commitment. Later in the day, Peter Dutton came out and said, absolutely, we'll repeal it. So, he had to clean up Angus's mess as much as Albo was making it really clear that we're not going to go down the path around houses.
Yeah, I've got to say though, that's a fair effort, Stephen, but when you're talking about the family home, I've been here for a long time now and I cannot remember a politician even allowing a flicker of a possibility around touching the family home, Michael.
So 10 out of 10 to Stephen for that effort. You can see why he was a successful minister for a long time, despite having to serve in Kevin Rudd's government. But anyway, so mate, Kieran, as you know, I've doubted for a long time whether Jim Chalmers is up to this job. I think he's a very presentable guy, looks good, sounds good, is good in front of a camera. But I'm just not sure how much substance is there. And I said on Paul Murray on Tuesday night that they'd love to tax, Labor in its heart would love to tax capital gains on the sale of the family home. And lo and behold, David Koch asks him 4 times, not once, 4 times, and he can't answer. Now, as you say, Kieran, it's politics 101. In his heart, to rule it out, in his heart, this bloke wants to tax capital gains on the family home. And my great doubt about him is this. I think to be a successful treasurer of this country, you need academic, intellectual brilliance. Costello had it. Keating, despite leaving uni at 14, had it. Howard had it. You have to be intellectually very, very gifted to be treasurer of this country. Now, Jim's academic achievements are modest. I'm not decrying people who have an arts degree from Griffiths University or a degree in communications as he has. But he's got no economic background in terms of study. He's worked for members of parliament as an advisor. He's never run a business. He's got a degree in Paul Keating's prime ministership. He's got no economic qualifications at all. And I'm afraid an arts degree from Griffiths University.
What was John Howard's? What was John Howard's? What was Paul Keating's? And what was Peter Costello's? The 3 people you've just cited. Minimal to zero economic qualifications, and the person with the least economic qualifications is called Peter Dutton. 0.
Well, I think their records show that Howard.
If that's your test,
well, hang on. Howard, Keating, and Costello had intellectual excellence, as we've seen. Costello, for example, won the tax prize at Monash in 1977. He didn't open a book for the whole year.
As a lawyer, yeah,
he won the tax prize. He won the prize for the best tax student as a lawyer. I was sitting in the exam with him. He was sitting in front of me. He hadn't opened his textbook, Kieran, for the whole year. One of those books you open.
Was he copying from you?
No.
Was he looking over your shoulder?
No, if he'd copied from me, he would have only got a credit. But you know from their history that Costello and Howard and Keating had great intellects. You may have doubted them at the beginning, but their record as treasurers shows.
But that's exactly where we are today.
But hang on, no, this bloke.
That's why your assessment is deeply flawed.
If you think this bloke is Paul Keating, you are sadly mistaken. As someone's written today, he's in the grand tradition of Wayne Swan and a couple of other, John Kerrin. That's Jim's.
Yeah, no, Wayne Swan won the International Treasurer of the Year award. He actually won the international award for getting us through the global financial crisis. Pretty good actual record.
You ridiculed Greg Hunt when he was awarded the best minister in the world several years ago. So don't play that tune. I just think Jim's performance.
Yeah, but Swanee took us through the global financial crisis.
I'm just simply saying I don't think anything I've seen from Chalmers tells me that he's up to the job of being treasurer. And if you want any evidence of that, the answer yesterday on David Koch's show shows you that he is completely out of his depth. As I said, it's 101 to rule out a tax on the capital gain. It's not a list of 20. It's the top list on it's the top of anyone's list. If you're wanting to change the tax system, are you going to tax capital gains on the family home? And it would be an easy argument for Labor to say if you bought a house for 18 million and sold it for 23 million, you should pay tax at the top marginal rate on the 5 million capital gains. That's a typical Labor argument. You'd say it only affects 0.00 of the electorate. Why wouldn't Labor tax that? Because that's what's in Jim Chalmers' mind, KG.
Let's hear Stephen's
people are making millions of dollars. You should tax that treasurer.
So, Stephen, your response now to Michael, because he's been very, very critical of Jim Chalmers for a long time.
Anyone, yeah. And if Michael was passing judgment on Howard, Keating or Costello in the first 12 months, he'd be saying all of those things about them. If he was being non-partisan, he'd be saying exactly those things. Jim has come out to his first real budget, and he'll be judged for the performance of the economy, the size of the deficit, the interest rates coming down, inflation coming down. All of those things will start to happen because he's got the right budgetary settings coming up in May. And that's how people will judge him. And Michael's been saying this from virtually day one. And he was wrong on day one. And in 12 months and 2 years' time, people will look back at what Michael said and be embarrassed for Michael.
Why, Stephen, why shouldn't Labor tax capital gains on the sale of the family home? If someone buys for 18 million and sells 2 years later for 23 million, why shouldn't they pay tax on the 5 million profit, according to Labor's thinking?
Well, Labor's not going to do it. We've never said we were going to do it.
But why shouldn't
and
they?
I appreciate 10 out of 10 for getting the mixer out and really giving it a big wind up today, Michael.
You know
but it's not happening. And Jim didn't say it was going to happen.
When Chalmers did that interview yesterday, it's in his mind. I don't want to rule this out. Four times Koshy asked him. Well, Chalmers could have said, don't be ridiculous, we have no intention whatsoever, but he left it open 4 times. Yeah. And then, of course, Albo's staff panicked. They rang Chalmers' staff. Great panic. Albo comes out, and then Chalmers has to come out. But this guy didn't have the economic smarts than I do. He never had the political, economic, or tax skills to rule this out.
And neither did Peter Costello. He's a lawyer.
Stephen and Michael, you're both in great form today. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I hope you have a great afternoon, fellas. Thanks for that.